Praveer Sinha joins us now, CEO and Managing Director with Tata Power. Mr. Sinha, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Every time we've interacted in the past, you've been very vocal about flagging off the issues in the power sector. A year ago, there was some hope. But given how the dynamics are moving for the power sector and what is happening to government collection, GST, DISCOMs, are we reaching that stage of no hope for Indian power sector?
Good morning, Nikunj. Always a pleasure to be on your show. One of the biggest problem, as you rightly mentioned, is the DISCOMs. And unless the financial viability of the DISCOMs is established, it would be very difficult for the power sector to improve. And when I talk of power sector, it's the conventional generation, it's the renewable projects, it's the transmission business. And everything is dependent on the money that is collected by the DISCOMs and paid to the generating companies and the transmission. And until and unless there is a large-scale improvement in the distribution companies, they become financially viable, it would be very difficult for bringing any reforms in the power sector. And we have seen in Delhi how we have been able to convert a loss-making company with a very dilapidated condition of the network into one of the most modern distribution companies in the world. And I say in the world because it is as good as anywhere else in US or Europe in terms of the quality of power and in terms of also the service that is being provided to the consumers. So I think if big ticket reforms have to happen, if the financial viability has to be established, one of the big things that needs to happen is the distribution reforms, apart from, of course, the tariff that needs to be revised and the regulatory process that needs to become more transparent.
So, Sinha, given that where the economy is, given that GST collections have been low, the fact that states this time are struggling to get their share even from the central government on the GST aspect, the financial sector, the state of financials for states will not improve. So can I safely say that jo chal raha hai chalta rahega, which is DISCOMs, will remain under pressure?
I don't think so. See, one of the big things that happened was Uday 3 years back. And Uday talked about transferring the losses of the DISCOMs to the state government. And this was done over a period of 3 years. And this year, 2019-20, will be the year when the total losses will get transferred to the state government. So the state government's financial condition will be under huge stress and then get money for development programs, salary will be under stress. So it is very important that the reform takes place because otherwise we are just moving from one of the Udays to the other Uday and the various other things that keeps on happening. But this is not moving the needle. So if the needle has to move, the reforms in the distribution sector has to happen. And I see that initial winds of change are happening. We have bid for Odisha and I'm expecting that the bid will get decided in the month of December. This is for Sesu, which is a large area consisting of 5 cities and the areas nearby, which is nearly 30,000 square kilometer area. We have also been in discussion with another 4 states and all of them are appreciating that the condition of the DISCOMs financially is unsustainable and they have to do this sooner than later. Until and unless that happens, the power sector will continue to struggle, whether it is the stress asset or the long-term PPAs which have to happen, the renewable projects which are getting stuck up because the ability of the DISCOMs to purchase additional power is restricted. So I think in the long run, the only way that the sector can transform and change itself is through the distribution reforms, and I think the writing is there on the wall.
And, I just want to take a leaf, Mr. Sinha, from what my colleague was actually highlighting, what's going on within the power sector. And he noted that N. Chandra, that's your Tata Sons chairman himself, has called for privatization of power DISCOMs. We all know DISCOMs are bleeding, continue to do so. Do you really think the answer lies in privatization?
I think it lies in privatization, because until and unless private sector comes in and there is more accountability in the way these DISCOMs are run, it would be very difficult to make them commercially viable, because the private sector will not only bring the money that is required for improving the network, but also bring the technology and the domain knowledge that is required to bring the transformation. So I think in all, the private sector can actually play a very, very critical role in reforming the distribution business. And this has been seen in many other countries also, when they brought about the distribution reforms, where they brought in the private sector. And when I say private sector, it is not the only India's private sector, but also global private sector companies will come. They'll bring the best-in-class experience, best-in-class processes, and they will also bring the technology and the domain knowledge and convergence, which unfortunately the existing government DISCOMs are not able to bring about. And while on one side we want to really leapfrog by talking about smart grids and smart metering, we also need to appreciate that these are things which will happen only if the foundational technologies are implemented in terms of the distribution automation, SCADA, GIS, and their integration. So I think the only hope really is that large-scale privatization, and privatization can be different models. It can be the PPP model or the hybrid reforms that has been done in some of the states, especially in terms of the hybrid franchisee that has been done, and so also some of the other services which can be outsourced. They are the only way that we will be able to bring the change and will bring the improvements in the working of these power companies.
Mr. Sinha, the problems around Mundra haven't yet really been resolved. So are you looking at recapitalizing the balance sheet, possibly by looking at either a rights issue or some kind of fundraising? How are you planning to go about this?
Yeah, Mundra issue is something which is very much there, and we are trying to resolve it with all the states. Once the government in Maharashtra and other places are fully functional, we'll try to get that sorted out. And we expect that this will happen in next few months. But meanwhile, we also keep on looking at growth opportunities, and we have identified that renewable and distribution business and some of the new services, especially in terms of home automation, EV charging, are new ways that we would be carrying out our growth plans. And many of these do not require the high capital that we were earlier incurring in large coal-based plants. So I think as a part of our growth, we keep on looking at how we first deleverage and divest some of our existing assets internationally. And secondly, look at getting some additional capital through various mechanisms which will help us to generate enough revenue and enough money for our growth.
I'm going to ask you a slightly big picture question, Mr. Sinha. What should your shareholders expect from Tata Power now? The power sector fundamentals will not change dramatically, they will only change incrementally, which means we are not for a dramatic change in the Indian power sector. India is still dominated by a very complex way in which how pricing is decided. There is a Mundra issue which hopefully will get settled down. So what for next 5 years, 7 years, even 10 years, what is in for your shareholders to stay committed to your stock?
I think the big ticket change that will happen is consolidation will take place in the power sector. First is that in the renewable space, there are many small players which are there. There are more than 25 players over there. I think consolidation will take place where people will look at long-term projects, long-term investment and not short-term investment and evaluation of the business. So that will ensure that there is a certain amount of gravity in terms of what sort of pricing that needs to be done for bidding purpose, what are sustainable levels at which these plants have to operate and financially become viable. So that aspect will definitely bring about a certain amount of cleaning, and that is where Tata Power will be able to make a big dent because of its knowledge of the power sector and knowledge of the renewable business, where many of the new technology interventions it will be utilizing. The second area that Tata Power will be working is the distribution area. Now again, this is an area which is very unique to Tata Power because over a period of time it has developed huge skill sets and domain knowledge, and which it will leverage in the opportunities that will come up. They may not be very many, but I think whatever will come up in the various states, and we are seeing that some of the states have already initiated the process of distribution reforms. Tata Power will play a very, very major role over there. The third is the business services or business solutions in terms of home automation, EV charging, some of the smart metering and smart city solutions that Tata Power is coming up with. And again, these will be an area which will be again unique to Tata Power because of its understanding of the sector and how the convergence of IT and electrical technology has taken place, and how the digitalization that takes place in power sector, how it can provide better services to the consumer. So I think going forward, there is huge expectation, and I'm sure that Tata Power will lead the way in the power sector to come in future years.
So let me rephrase my final question carefully. If I look at Tata Power between 2000 and 2010, you went global, you acquired assets. You expanded your balance sheet, you expanded your operations by a lot of inorganic growth. Last 10 years, you've been stuck in clutch of regulatory issues. Your debt became a challenge, you've been struggling with your debt, you've recapitalized your balance sheet, you've not been getting true benefits of the acquisitions which you've done between 2000 and 2010. Next 5 years, what would be the core fix which you would be focusing on? You said that you will move into new areas. You've said that you would be deleveraging your balance sheet. So the face of Tata Power, which right now comes from distribution and thermal generation, in 2025, how much of your business will come from areas which do not exist right now, areas which are incubating? Because that is the transformation which we are looking forward to, Mr. Sinha. I understand that next quarter, nothing will happen for Tata Power, Indian power sector. But next 5 years, what is that thing you will surprise us
with? Absolutely right. We are going through a huge change within Tata Power and within the power sector. And the learnings that we have seen from international players, especially in the power services business, these are some of the learnings that we are trying to bring over here, wherein the consumer will play a very, very critical role. And that is why you have seen that we are actually coming with huge amount of products and services which are consumer related. We are talking of doing 100 cities for rooftop solar, and that's a program which is going very well. We have already done nearly 40 cities and will complete 100 cities in next 6 to 8 months. Secondly, we are getting into a large way in microgrids, where we will over a period of 5 years cover 10,000 villages and have nearly 25 million consumers. The third is the distribution reforms. So many of the initiatives that you would see will pan out in next 5 years are B2C businesses, whereby we will be directly interacting with consumers, providing them value-added services, which was never heard of in the power sector. And our objective is that 50% of our revenue in future will come out of services business, which is distribution, rooftop, microgrids, solar pumps. So I think the huge change that is happening within power sector and within Tata Power is that from a B2B company or B2G company, we are moving into a B2C company. And I think that brings the uniqueness in the company, that without incurring large capital expenditure, without over leveraging our balance sheet, we will be able to go for asset-light business models, which will help us to grow and help us to also bring about new services to our consumers. So I think this is a change that we are expecting that will happen, and this will benefit not only our consumers but also all our stakeholders, and we are very confident that going forward the transformation that Tata Power is going through will also transform the power sector as such, whereby the consumers will start demanding in other cities also where Tata Power is not there, that these reforms should happen in their cities, in their states, and they should benefit from the new value-added services that is being provided. So I think it's more of consumer-centric solutions which is coming up, more of distributed energy solutions which is coming up, and more of consumer interactions and behavior changes that will come, which will change the way Tata Power will provide services to its consumers.
Thanks so much for joining us this morning and discussing that with us at length. Thanks, Mr. Sinha.